Hey guys, so there's going to be a couple more reviews coming up soon. I know I'm a little behind, but I wanted to go through Benchmade's, they were calling it their Season 2 reveal. There's some interesting stuff in here, there's some not so interesting stuff in here, so let's just sort of go through it relatively quickly. So this is all stuff, most of it can be pre-ordered on retailers right now. All of it should be available in the coming months. So the first thing that they are showing is the variations of the mini tagged out here. So, as you guys might have seen in my review of the tagged out, I am a big fan of this model in general. I'm just checking some details about the current version here. Yeah, interestingly, they have made the price on the mini ever so slightly higher than the price on the full size, probably giving you a little preview of how much Benchmade's going to inflate their prices. So the full size tagged out in this orange Grivery and CPM 154 is 180. This one here is 190. Oh, I see here. It's going to be available on the site in 3 days from when I'm recording this. I'm recording this on July 13th. So it looks like on the 16th, this stuff should be available. Now, this, from everything I see here, looks to be exactly what you would expect from a mini tagged out, just like they did with the mini bug out, where they literally took the exact same stuff and just shrunk it down. The profile of the handle looks to be about the same. The steel is still CPM 154, still an orange Grivery handle, and still, when we look at the specs, 0.09 inches thick on the blade, so they did not shrink the blade thickness. The handle thickness looks to be about the same. I'm getting conflicting data from Blade HQ on my other screen here, but it looks about the same. Interestingly, slightly frustratingly, they kept the blade slightly over 3 inches. For those of you that have 3-inch knife laws, that's just a bit silly. Putting it at 3.04 and not say, shaving 5/100ths of an inch off and making it just below 3 inches. But hey, that's what they're going to do. It's still going to have all the great things that the tagged out has. You still got a 3.04 inch blade with 1.68 ounces of weight with these Grivery handles, which is fairly absurd. This is still going to be a super slicey knife. And basically when you look at it, the tagged out was significantly larger than the bug out. This is going to be very close to, yeah, basically the same size as the bug out, but with the tagged out format here. Personally, I think this is probably going to be a more compelling knife than the bug out. It looks like, actually, now that I look at it, they priced this at the same as what they're pricing the bug out for these days. So that's what they're doing with the pricing here, where you can get most tagged outs a little bit cheaper than a bug out right now. So it's going to be basically same size and profile as your full size bug out, but with the more directive handle shape of the tagged out, there's more sort of curve toward the back here, with the bigger drop, because this is a full flat grind with a swedge, whereas the bug out is technically, a safer grind. So this is still going to be slicier than the bug out because there's just a little bit more space to drop on that blade there. And it's going to be even lighter than the bug out. So I think that this is going to be just a more compelling knife in general than the bug out, and I did like the full-size tagged out, so I anticipate I will like the mini tagged out as well. The one question is how well this opening hole is going to work in the smaller format. Now you do have the other two variations here. You've got a carbon fiber mini bug out with the MagnaCut blade and the orange Cerakote blade here with your carbon fiber scales. And then you've got the G10 version with the thumb stud. Again, as I went through in my review, this MagnaCut blade, this MagnaCut version, $365 for this mini version starts to feel quite steep. And honestly, retail, the price on this one is steep. But I can a little bit more understand where this price is coming from. I'm not saying that it's justified. I'm not saying it's a better buy. But I can see if this orange Grivery one is $190, I can see switching to carbon fiber on the handles, Cerakoting the blades, switching to MagnaCut, doing, a milling versus an injected molded hand, adding this backspacer. I can see $170 in difference in price between the Grivery and the carbon fiber version here. This G10 version, it's a little harder. I mean, it's $290. It's almost the same price. It's basically cheaper because they're using S45VN, probably a slightly cheaper steel, and they're not Cerakoting the blade. Still got that backspacer, which, by the way, as you might remember my review, this backspacer annoys the crap out of me. I really wish they had the full handle here because it's just annoying. This is going to be a cool sort of direct bug out replacement. Interestingly also, and let me check if they did it with the full-sized one. The grind on this GT, yeah, they did it on the full-size. No, that's the mini. I'm looking over on my other screen here. This one is also a saber grind. Yeah, they did on the full size. That was the same thing on the full size one. I hadn't noticed that before. This is a saber grind, meaning it's got a flat here that drops rather than being the full flat grind of the two with the opening hole. That's probably something to do with how they're mounting this thumb stud here. So this one probably won't be quite as elite of a slicer, but still all good options. $290 for this G10 version tend to feel particularly steep. This one, the carbon fiber one, if you want the flash, okay, you're buying it for the flash. With Benchmade, you're always going to pay a huge premium for premium materials, extra colors, things like that. So that's the mini tagged out. Will be very interesting. Looking forward to trying one of those out at some point. Let's see if I can get my browser to go back here. Let me pause. Okay, back to our full list here. So again, you got your mini tagged. This is the one that's going to get the most people interested. You've got new variants of the Osborne, the 940. You've got the mini, the 945. You've got the full size, the 940, and you've got the auto. You got these burnt copper aluminum handles, which is a very cool color. And then you've got a dark wash blade, and then you've got MagnaCut as your blade steel. Now, my 940 review is coming up, but it's going to be about as positive as my 940 review or my 945 review. I still think that this is one of the best, most functional knives on the market. It's just a fantastic, everyday, useful knife that does a little bit of everything. Now, the 940 in 2024 does feel expensive there's a lot of milling going on these handles, but with aluminum handles and an S30V blade, this knife feels expensive full retail. And you see that on the secondary market. This thing sells for about $150 on the secondary market. You take a bath if you ever buy a 940 at retail. The carbon fiber 940 is extraordinarily expensive these days with S90V carbon fiber handles, and this is nice carbon fiber, but there's nothing exceptional about it, for $350. S90V premium steel for sure, but this knife for $350 feels very expensive given what else you can get for $350 these days. The G10 version at $230 tends to feel a little bit expensive as well, especially because these G10 versions, in my experience, tend to have some blade play. But if you look here at what they're offering in this burnt copper one, you've got a new aluminum color, which is a very cool color, goes nicely with the black accents. This is sort of, the only way that you've been able to get a black bladed 940 historically has been to get a Sprint run or one of the retailer exclusives. Most people that have black bladed 940s got it from Blade HQ when they did their M4 version, which I think they're still selling. It sort of comes in and out of stock, or has historically. They might have finally discontinued it last year. Yeah, it looks like they finally discontinued the M4 940. So this is your new black bladed 940 variant. It looks very cool. The 940 is still a great platform, and MagnaCut is a really good steel for the 940. It is a tough steel. Again, not again, but the 940, this blade profile is meant to do a little bit of everything. It's meant to be a utility tool. It's not meant to be an elite slicer. It does work better when you lay this edge back, but is meant to do a bit of everything. It's still a thin blade. I think it's 110 thousandths, 115 thousandths thick. So it's still a thin blade, but a very tough steel like MagnaCut works really, really well for the intended use case of a 940, which is a knife that you want to sort of beat the snot out of. This version, this 940 version, is already sold out. The pre-order has sold out at Blade HQ. So I anticipate this being very popular. This black wash is going to go great with some mods. The blacked out hardware looks very cool. This is going to be a cool looking, very useful knife. You're definitely paying the butterfly tax for this one, $300. is a lot in general, but a lot of people really love the 940. And honestly, paying $60 more to get MagnaCut, if you're going to buy a 940 at retail, paying $60 more to get MagnaCut as your blade steel, still with an aluminum handle, compared to paying only $60 less, 240, and getting S9 or S30V as your blade steel. I tend to not be a blade steel snob, but the extra performance that MagnaCut gets for a $60 premium really does make sense in the 940. And honestly, this version here makes the S90V version, the carbon fiber version, really hard to justify. And I really like S90V as a blade steel, but with this one being cheaper than the 940-1, $50 less than your, oh, it's this one right here. $50 less than your 940-1 while getting MagnaCut instead of S90V. You gotta really love S90V or really love carbon fiber to get the 940-1 going forward. Let's go back to our main page. Okay, scrolling down further. Mini tagged out, mini tagged out. Okay, this is a strange one. This one here. Yeah, I'm gonna do it this way. So let's look at the PSK. This is an outright new model by Benchmade. In their video, they called this a hard use knife. It's in CPM MagnaCut. It's in two versions, one with a carbon fiber bolster and G10 handles, the other version with a G10 bolster and G10 handles. It's got this MagnaCut blade with, it's almost definitely a Cerakote on the blade. It looks like tungsten Cerakote with little milled out pockets in the blade itself and these big contoured handles, thick slabs of G10, and what looks to be a lock, as some people have called it, where this is, I presume some sort of lock to keep the blade, to reinforce the axis lock when it's opened, or maybe even to keep it shut when it's closed. $400 for a knife with G10 handles and MagnaCut steel. But here, my bigger problem is when you look at the specs of this one. 110 thousandths thick on the blade stock. MagnaCut is a tough steel, but literally the 940 that we were just talking about has thicker blade stock than this one here. This is way thinner blade stock than something like the Adama. So yeah, they confirmed this cobalt Cerakote on the blade here. That is very thin blade stock for a quote-unquote hard use knife. Put it this way, the only thing that Hinderer makes that has blade stock this thin is their slip joint. Hinderer's skinny stock is 30% thicker than this at 140 thousandths. Now, do blade stocks need to be as thick as they generally are with modern super steels? Probably not. But it's going to feel funny for a lot of people having blade stock this thin on a quote-unquote hard-use knife. The other fact is, it's thin blade stock, but they have not kept the handles thin. 616 thousandths, so almost 6/10 of an inch thick. That is a chunker of a handle. That is a thick boy. That is literally as thick in the handle as a full-size XM18. I mean, this thing is going to be great in the hand. It's going to feel like a fixed blade in the hand with all of this G10 contouring and all that sort of stuff. No surface texture I can see, so it might be a little slick. It might roll a little easily, but boy, oh boy, is that a thick handle. Oh boy, and it's an assisted knife. They are certainly not selling this one to knife nerds. They are selling this one to the kinds of people that, that go to their Cabela's, buy Benchmade's there. And yeah, with an assist on top of that. Bleh. And then the worst part is the weight. This is a 5.3 ounce knife with G10 handles. That is super heavy for a Benchmade. Lots of, obviously, if you get that's about the same weight as a XM18. But instead of getting the super overbuilt, full one side titanium, other side half titanium with thick blade stock that you get for a Hinderer, you're getting G10 handles, a thinner blade, and it's based on an axis lock, which, axis lock is a tough lock, but it just doesn't, I understand the rationale from a marketing and sales perspective for this knife. They are probably going to have an easy job selling this knife to, you know, people that want to, that people that like Benchmade, that Benchmade is their company, and they want something that, you know, feels like a as tough as the Adamas, and for some reason they want something other than the Adamas, and they want, you know, these are the kind of people that, you know, are going to buy your claymores and stuff like that, but want just a life that looks and feels hard use. But when you look at the specs, this kind of feels like the worst of this quote unquote hard use mentality. This knife just looks big. It just looks heavy. It just looks chunky without having anything in really the blade or the handle materials or design other than being a big, thick handle with strong ergonomic lines. I don't see anything that makes this a good hard use knife, particularly at $400. That's Demco AD20S pricing. Like, there is no way that I could believe that this is going to be a better hard use knife than an AD20S, than a military, which is way cheaper, than an XM18 or even an XM18 skinny. Um, I'm having a hard time believing that. It could surprise me, but again, with the assist as well, this one doesn't feel like it's made to appeal to knife nerds. It feels like it's made to appeal to more casual Benchmade users. And $450 for this carbon fiber version, I mean, that's just for collectors. They've got some new bug out colors here. You know, mini bug out, they talked about, oh, this dark purple sold a ton at Blade Show or whatever. Who cares? New colors of the bug out, that's cool. This is a cool blade color. It is always cool if you're the sort of person that likes to modify your bug outs when you get a new blade color. Yeah, this is Desert Verde, so it's a sort of light green. This is a cool color. So that's nice. That's always nice to see. Gives people that like to mod their bug outs a few more options, because the one thing that does get super, super expensive when you get into mods is if you want to start Cerakoting pieces yourself, that gets very expensive. So that's cool. New blade color. Other than that, same blade color here. That's fine. You've got a readout now in a, you know, same handles, still $200 for a readout, which feels expensive. Still CPM D2. Now CPM D2, significant improvement over traditional D2. I don't have that big an issue with CPM D2 on this if they want a tough beatery steel. The cool thing about this is they've made a Tonto blade shape. This knife feels like it makes a lot of sense in a Tonto. It is meant to be, you know, people have talked about this as the successor to the Griptilian, but it feels even a bit more hard use focused than the Griptilian, both in the way they've marketed it and sort of just the way it's designed. D2 is a steel that you're going to pick to prioritize toughness. Blade thickness of 124 thousandths, that is thick for Benchmade. Thick handles, a relatively large blade, and still, you know, 3.7 ounces, that's not light, but you're close to an ounce an inch. It's heavy for Benchmade, but it's not heavy by normal knife standards. This looks good in the Tonto. This is cool in the Tonto, and frankly, I think given how a lot of people have been actually using their readouts, a Tonto makes sense. There aren't a ton of good Tonto options in Benchmade's lineup, so frankly, this distinguishes the readout a little bit more from the other things that they have to offer. And they kept the pricing the same as the traditional readout. I might review one of these at some point. It's not a particularly compelling knife to me in general. I don't tend to like handles this big and thick. I've got a couple Griptilians I'll be reviewing at some point. It's fine. It's fine. I feel like, you know, this kind of just sort of came and went a little bit, the readout as a model. And again, you know, having this Tonto variant does do a little bit more to distinguish it, and the handle colors are cool. Next, we've got, okay, this is interesting. They probably said it in the video. I'm going to call it the Dacian. That looks like a soft C. So this is a beautiful looking fixed blade. This grind here, this rising grind, the jimping all the way across the top, the contour of this handle, this is a very pretty fixed blade. This is pretty in a way that a lot of Benchmades don't tend to be. You know, it reminds me of some of Cerberus knives as fixed blades. It's very of the market right now. It's very consistent with where the market tends to be. Pocket fixies are getting very, very popular. And this is Benchmade trying to dive into that market. It looks super cool. Let's see, what's our blade stock on this? 120,000, it's not too bad. And then we've got MagnaCut on the blade. That is totally fine. This is a cool little fixed blade design. These rising grinds with, I mean, technically it's a very big drop point, but really what this is this is a warney with a bit of curve added to it that they then oriented upward. These can be great sort of general utility kind of knives, especially with a little bit of belly like this. If you ever tried the Wharncliffe Hinderer half track, it had a very similar grind. We've seen a few other knives I can't think of at the moment with a similar grind, and it's great because you get that sort of, you can bring the tip down and do your utility cuts like you could do with a Wharncliffe, but then at the same time, with this bit of belly, with that rising grind, it's not as restrictive for general use as a Wharncliffe can be. So then they end up being super useful, super versatile blades. With 120 thousandths and a, relatively shallow grind here, this thing won't be a supreme slicer, but it'll do the job. And again, this micarta handle here, very nice chamfers all the way around. Cool bit of well, it's not jimping. This is basically, an ode to a cord wrap, because if you did this with a cord wrap, you would have this sort of pattern on the back. It's a cool little homage there. This looks like a very comfortable handle. They even add a nice sharpening choil. This one feels like it is very much appealing to knife enthusiasts. Now, as much as we like to complain about Benchmade pricing in general, their fixed blade pricing is, oh, and this one is gorgeous with the blue Cerakote on here and the red micarta handles. That's a very pretty fixed blade. Is this actual copper on the hardware there? Does it say blue denim? No, it does not say. I mean, I would assume that is probably anodized titanium, even though it looks a lot like copper. I'm just not used to. Oh, look at that! They even call out 4V in their Magnificat description. That's cool. That's unusually smart by Benchmade. Yeah, they don't mention if that's actual copper, at least that I can see. Copper would be unusual for Benchmade, but it looks gorgeous. $300 for a pocket fixie is a lot. There's tons of custom makers right now that are selling pocket fixies that are actual customs or machine made small batch that are well below $300. Benchmade's fixed blade pricing in general is absurd. Like Steingraber Performance Knives is putting out a new version of their Shark maybe today. And they're charging like 150. He's charging like 150 for a Shark, which is an insane performer with his custom heat treat, with his insane grinds. Like, this price is absurd. Will people pay it? Absolutely. Pocket fixies are just that hot right now. So they will sell a bunch of these, I'm sure, at $300. They are going to capture the market. But boy, oh boy, that price is high. But I do like the design. This bug out here is cool, but doesn't really have a good reason to exist. I will say, when Benchmade does their machined metal handles, whether it's their new titanium handles in the customizer, the 940 customizer, or whether it's this brass handle or their historical, 940 handles, their machined metal handles look very cool. This is a very cool design. I like the chamfers. I like the contouring. There's a lot of machine hours to do this. This isn't just taking the typical bug-out handle and making it in brass. And then this is, did they keep S30V as the blade steel? Where's your M390? Okay, M390. Now, I will tell you the one thing that's compelling about this, because let me go through my little rant first, which is this is $320, which is basically a $130 premium over a stock bug out. Now, granted, if you're coming from the aluminum version and you want that M390, it's about the same price as your aluminum version, so it's not a premium over that. But this is an expensive bug out. And if all you want is brass, oh wait, hold up, is this brass colored aluminum, or is this, oh, I see. Okay, so this is just another aluminum variant. So scratch everything I was about to say. I thought this was actual brass with aluminum in it, like a brass aluminum alloy, which would be unusual, but hey, what do I know? No, this is aluminum colored brass. So this is another variant of the where is it here? This is just another variant of their typical aluminum handled one. Can I scroll this? Yeah. Okay, so this is another variant of your M390 aluminum bug out, which this one looks sort of sleek with the starburst pattern on the handles. This one looks a little more rugged. Still M390 on the blade. They've got their black wash on the handle. Again, very cool milling pattern. So, fine. I got kind of excited because I thought when I first looked that this was actual brass, that they had put some kind of like bead blast on, which would be cool. It would be pointless because they were really good aftermarket brass handles for the bug out. That's where I was going. I found out that that premise was entirely wrong. It's just another aluminum handle bug out. Burnt brass is a very cool Cerakote color, but this Cerakote finish is also going to, is it anodized or Cerakoted? They probably, do they say? Anodized. Okay, anodized, even better. So this coating will hold up well. That's great. I'm glad they anodized it. It's cool. 320 bucks is a lot for a bug out. Unless you really, really like M390 as your blade steel. Looks like a nicely contoured, nicely comfortable handle. I would generally prefer to buy a cheaper bug out, especially on the secondary market, and then buy some aftermarket parts to customize it into exactly what you want, rather than buying one of Benchmade's stock configurations, because there is such a great aftermarket for bug out parts. But the fact is, you're probably still coming close to 300 bucks into your bug out when you do all that customization. So the bug out gets a lot less compelling at this price, but I see what they're doing there. Mini Claymore, I don't have much to comment on Benchmade's autos in general. I personally live in an area where I cannot carry an auto, so I just have very little experience with them, and I'm never going to have much experience with them. We'll get to the Daros in a second, and then they do have the Laro here, which is a new balisong from Benchmade. I don't do balisongs either, so I don't have very much to say on that. 650 feels like a lot, but again, I don't know the balisong market that well. And then we've got the Mini Neros. I mean, their theme obviously in this drop is they're doing mini versions or slight variations on existing stuff. Still $560, which is an enormous amount. The secondary market has basically agreed that this is a $350 knife. You will see consistently that your plain version of the full size Neros will sell for between $300 and $350, and your DLC version is going to sell for between $340 to $360. At $350, I have not handled the Neros yet. I'm not sure if I'm going to handle or review the Neros at any point. I have no need for a knife like this. I have very little interest personally in a knife like this. But I will say, if they had listed this for $350, the full-size Neros, what Benchmade did here is cool. 0.08, 80 thousandths on the blade stock is very, very thin. 280 thousandths for the handle thickness is insanely thin. And 1.98 ounces for a 2.9-inch blade, 2.98-inch blade with full titanium handles is extraordinarily light. Like, there is a lot of machine work, there is a lot of design engineering, things like that go into making this knife. Again, that's not justifying a $560 price. That's probably justifying a price around $300, $350, something like that for the full size. The Mini will probably be a more compelling knife. This super thin profile, first off, just from a looks perspective, when they shrink the length of this down, it feels like a more balanced design. The blade and handle look more aesthetically balanced to me in this shrunk down format compared to the longer full-size Neros, but also this super thin profile that they've got, the super thin and slicey blade stock, the super thin handles, the lightweight profile works better in a light or in a sub 3-inch blade. It's something that's like sized for a secondary carry, something that's sized for, you know, more smaller, delicate tasks. It makes sense. I do think this Mini Neros, as a result, is going to be a compelling knife at a not compelling price. This is just, I mean, I don't need to talk enough. Oh, interestingly enough, I thought that was the case. They switched from M390 to 20 CV, which is, you know, a neutral shift basically, but it's interesting for the Mini. But This is probably, it would be an interesting knife to review at some point because the knife itself, there's a lot of compelling stuff going on here. And I do think the Narrows, as a design platform, is not like anything else in the market right now. There's nothing else quite like it. There is a reason for it to exist. It's just so if you separate the knife from the price, it's decently compelling, especially in this smaller format. But you can't separate the knife from the price because you still need to pay that price to get it. So this is one of those knives that I think is decently compelling on the secondary market. If you're willing to buy this secondhand and pay $300 to $350 for it, it's kind of cool. It's still, there's no need to have something like this in your collection. You don't need a knife this thin. You know, a knife that is like the 945 is thin enough to basically disappear in your pocket. So as I was saying, if you need a thin, small user, then get the tagged out or something like that. This is, I mean, it's a Halo product. It's meant for bougie collector types. It's so practically the benefits cannot be justified by the price, but hey, it's cool. So anyway, that's Benchmade's Season 2 drop. The mini tagged outs are interesting. I think a lot of people will end up liking these once they get their hands on them, especially now the secondary market for the tagged out is really starting to take off a bit. And I still believe this $190 version with the CPM 154 is by far the best buy for most people. I hate this backspacer. Hate it. This variant of these variants of the Osborne, the 940, are quite compelling. This is now going to clearly be the second best Osborne to buy. I still think for most people S90V is a good enough steel, and you're better off just buying the standard green aluminum version, especially because you can get it for $150, $160 off the secondary market. But if you are a steel snob and you want a better steel, this immediately becomes a way more compelling offering than the 940-1, which has priced itself into ridiculousness. This knife is kind of dumb, but I don't think it's really oriented to anybody who's the sort of person that's going to be watching this video. This is just nothing about the details of this knife really makes sense. It's more meant to look tough than be tough from everything that I can see. New bug out colors. Woo, new bug out colors. That's cool. Readout, I like it better in a Tonto than a drop point. That's cool. This is a very cool pocket fixie. Looks great. A lot of great design features here. Price is absurd. All Benchmade fixed blade prices are absurd. This bug out, I was excited about it when I thought this was actually a brass handle. Now that I know that it's just an anodized aluminum handle, it's like, okay, cool, new bug out, whatever. It's hard for me to get excited about new bug out handle variations because the aftermarket for bug out scales is so rich. There's so many offerings from Flightanium and Rip's Garage Tech and Rock Scale Design, RC Blade Works, a bunch of others that I can't think of right now, that you've long been able to make your bug out look exactly like you want to. But hey, it's a nice handle. I can't comment on the autos or the Bally and this Narrows. The Narrows makes more sense in a 3-inch profile than in the longer profile. Still, I mean, again, everybody knows the price on the Narrows is absurd, but it is doing some cool things. So anyway, that's Benchmade Season 2. Those are the Benchmades that will be coming out at retailers relatively soon. Hopefully you found that little journey interesting, maybe enlightening. Let me know if you're excited about any of this stuff. Typical Benchmade stuff, it's all priced probably higher than it should be. But the fact is, Benchmade still does make a lot of compelling knives, and I do think that they are at their best when they're making light, thin users like the tagged out, like the 945 and the 940, stuff like that. Those tend to be their most compelling knives because they do make, I would argue, better light, thin knives than just about anybody else out there. When they start to get chunkier, that's when you start to have more competitors and they start to feel less competitive as a result. So yeah, let me know what you think down in the comments. Hope you found this interesting. And more reviews will be coming up soon.